variations in Europe began since the 11th century in the early medieval period, with varieties deriving from Vulgar Latin and the language of the various invaders, um, who were Galician, Portuguese, Austrian, Leonese, Castilian, Ruydian, Navarrese, Aragonese, and Catalan. After that, we have Castilian, Catalan, and Galician Portuguese as prestige varieties on the continuum. These variations were associated with powerful courts and dynasties. Um, then, in the 16th and 17th centuries, we have that um, perception of knowing Spanish, meaning or as a result of being educated. So the ones who were learning Spanish were the monarchs, the merchants, the administrators, and military personnel. By the end of the 18th century, Spanish was becoming to be accepted as the only appropriate language for use in formal context. Conversely, the standing of the other main peninsular language, which I mentioned in the beginning, Catalan, Galician, and Basque, diminished and their language functions decreased, unable to compete with the higher status of Spanish. So here we can see that there is something about status. So if the language I'm talking or I'm using, sorry, um, has certain of acceptance and status, I would prefer to use that one. Then, after this happened, um, Spaniards lost the war, and they were feeling really frustrated because of that, and they were really worried about it because they felt that they will lose their identity, they will lose their language. So Unamuno um, argued that it is in the name of culture that we must fight so that there is no official language, no national cultural language in Spain other than Spanish, which is spoken by more than 20 nations, and regardless of whatever the beauty, merits, or glories of other Spanish languages, which should be left to their domestic lives. So here we can see the importance of language as part of a culture, and that culture parts of building up identity. So there was something about war. So there was a historical event which was significant and relevant for them, and also it was an excuse to recognize the importance and the transcendence um, of Spanish. Well, the previous was in Europe. Now, Spanish is spread in the Americas. So, from the time of the earliest expeditions, the Roman Catholic Church established a number of missions in the Americas and other colonies to convert the indigenous people. So, how um, did they do that? Well, they used Spanish. Um, I mean, they taught them Spanish because the Spanish missionaries know how to speak Quechua, Nahuatl, Aymara, Guarani, that were the Indian languages, and they spread Christianity and facilitate evangelization of the natives. Um, Once they learned their language, they stopped using it because they saw the Amerindian language as ungodly and believed that Christianity could only be transmitted through Spanish. So I think this is the first time we talk about religion, because when we were talking about English, we were focused more on political and economic issues. But here we can see how religion was influencing significantly in the way the indigenous, were learning and in the way they were communicating. Um, Even when certain Amerindian language were given status, in practice they were mostly silenced in the public sphere because, as I was explaining previously, it was not allowed for the church. So if the church didn't approve it, it will be not allowed. And then Spanish, because of this, Spanish became the official language in many South America countries, such as Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Equatorial Guinea, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, Paraguay, Puerto Rico, Spain, Uruguay, and Venezuela. But how did they gain this place? By omitting, ignoring, and killing the Amerindian languages. So the question here is if it was fair, if it was the way to do things, and is not um, hesitating about the power of English in terms of globalization, but is um, thinking about the identity of the American people. What happened now? The 20th and 21st centuries, the spread and retreat of Spanish. So we have two sides of the coin. The first one, Castilian elites evoke Spanish as the foundation for a pan-Hispanic imagined community. This means that what they want to create was an enormous, giant community of Spanish people that not just speak Spanish, but follow certain rules in terms of culture, in terms of social behavior, in terms of economics and political organization. While in the other side we have the Americas, that throughout the colonial period and even after independence had been gained, Creole elites adhered to the peninsular language standard. Well, until here, we have been studying how Spanish um, have evolved since the beginning and how the varieties appeared according cultural, historical moments and also community needs. But here comes a great question and is where is it used? Who is trying to learn Spanish? So let's begin saying that one of the main defining characteristics of Spanish today is diversity. We have different population speaking in Spanish. There are 550 million Spanish speakers worldwide. And this is something that called my attention and is that in the US is the second largest Spanish speaking country after Mexico. And in general terms, it is spoken by 44 countries. Another fun fact that I found is that Spanish is spoken in the most popular destination, Spain, Mexico, and United States. So um, this makes that people who want to travel to that place think about the language and maybe feel motivated to learn that language. This will be also one of the main reasons why people uh, is is willing to learn about Spanish.